What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Something About Sports podcast. I'm your host, Leon Edwards, back with another episode. This is going to be our second special edition episode in the last three. Originally, I was going to talk about the Chiefs draft in episode 7.5, but episode 7 keeps taking a whole bunch of different shapes. There's been so much stuff that's going on ever since I started recording that episode, and there's a couple of things that I want to make sure I include in that episode, just to go ahead and get them out of the way while they're still fresh and get a chance to talk about them now. That's why number one, that's why this took a little bit longer, because I had some of this already recorded for that episode, but I'm going back again and starting this over for a special edition episode where I'm just going to talk about the Chiefs draft class. I actually think it's going to end up being a little bit better because I can go a little bit more in depth. I'm not worried about keeping the timing off. Instead of episode 7.5 having this in it, I'm going to do this as its own episode. And then episode 7.5 will come. I'll get a chance to talk about some KU stuff, the new KU football coach, different things like that. But I'm happy to go ahead and share my thoughts on the Chiefs draft class. It's been about a week, so it's taken a little while for me to get this next episode out. But I did want to make sure I got it to you. A lot of you guys, by the time you hear this, will have already heard a lot of people give their opinions and takes on the Chiefs draft class. Some of this stuff might not be brand new to you as far as what you're hearing, but I still want to give my side of this and let you guys know what I'm thinking about this draft class and how I think Brett Veach did this year, which I think I can start it off by saying I actually think he did a really good job. I will be honest, when he made the first two picks, I wasn't super thrilled about the positions, if I'm being honest, about how I felt, just the raw feeling, especially with them happening back to back like that. I wasn't too thrilled with the positions, but as I've gotten into studying the players more, the entire draft class and kind of the direction that he took, I'm able to see where the rationale came from and what he thought he could get later on. I'll talk about a lot of that different stuff in this episode. I'll talk about each draft pick, what I think about each draft pick, what I think the value is. I don't want to do grades. I see a lot of people do draft grades, and I could come with a grade for the class, but I don't want to do a grade just yet because even the grades are going to change. Just thinking back to even Patrick Mahomes, when Patrick Mahomes was selected 10th, there wasn't everybody given that draft pick an A+. But now, is anybody going to look back on that and say that's not an A+? So that stuff can change by the day. It can change by the acquisition for the team. It can change by the type of people that you pick up later in the draft. Because I would say after the second round was over, my grade for the second round is a lot different now than it would have been right after it was over. I think my grade is higher now for that group of guys. I think it's a little tough to give a letter grade on these just because I don't want to box it in, and I know that it's a very fluid situation. So instead of giving a letter grade, I'll just kind of give my whole line of thinking behind these picks and what I'm feeling about them. So I will start off by saying I do think Brett Veach did a really good job with this draft. I know he gets a lot of slack from a lot of people, especially for drafts, but I think this is going to be his second draft in a row where he's got some guys that are going to play and they're going to be contributors on this team. I think at least 3 of these guys will probably get significant playing time just this coming season. And you could even see more depending on the development of some of these other guys. You could even see more than that. But I do think that 3 of these guys for sure are going to play a decent amount. And I think that to me shows that this is a pretty good draft. This is something that he can build on. So I'll just start by saying how I feel about each day. I'll say that the second day, first day for the Chiefs, the second day in general for the draft, I think that was more of Brett Veach wanting to get some guys that he knows can come in and play. That was what I took away from that after he finished the draft. I think at first glance, the Nick Bolton pick and the Creed Humphrey picks by themselves in a vacuum, I would say that both of those guys are really good players, and I'll get into each individual player here shortly, but I would say that both of those guys are really good players that you can see playing early in their careers. I just wasn't a huge fan of the premium pick at either position. I think that was where the disconnect was for me, with more pressing needs and more options at other positions at the time, at that time still available. That part for me was why I wasn't down on these, because I really like Nick Bolton as a player. I think he can be a defensive leader. He can carry that towards that Tyrann Mathieu has. He plays with that kind of energy. He has that kind of demeanor on the field. He's very intelligent at diagnosing plays. So I like the player a lot. I just didn't like the pick value I thought there were some receivers out there and different things like that. But also another thing that kind of played into that for me was just the fact that the Chiefs did just use a second round pick last year on Willie Gay as well. So you got 2 second round picks in a row on linebackers. Now, I do understand that they're very different players if they both hit their ceiling. At least that's what it looks like. Nick Bolton wasn't asked to do a whole lot of pass coverage and different things like that in college. He was more just like a zone type of linebacker from what I've studied. That, and I guess I'll throw this in there. This is probably why it's taking me a little bit longer. I wanted to try to study at least what I could find on most of these players before giving my opinion on them and what I thought about them. That kind of has another wrinkle to why it took me a little bit longer to get this out than most people. But either way, I think he was more of just like a zone backer more so than being given assignments as far as man coverage is concerned. I think Willie Gay probably has a higher ceiling as far as in pass coverage, a pass coverage linebacker. But then also the main thing that Chiefs fans want to know about is can one of these linebackers get Ben Niemann off the field? I don't think Nick Bolton is going to be that linebacker, at least not in year one. I think that would be more so something we should be looking for from Willie Gay. I think Willie Gay will be more of the type of linebacker that could accomplish that feat, at least that tall task that we've been trying to see somebody accomplish for some years now in Kansas City. But I think the thing about Willie Gay is going to be picking up on the playbook, picking up on the complexities of the defense. I think that's probably why we didn't see him get a chance to play more last season. What was probably more the reasoning than the talent. I think anytime we saw him play, we saw the talent. I think it was just that he probably wasn't picking up on the defense as fast as we probably would have liked it. That's not something that I think we'll have an issue with Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton's well documented as a very smart football player. He'll pick up on the defense fast. It's just that the position that I think we drafted him for, I think that position is going to be filled in front of him for next year with Anthony Hitchens. So we'll have to see if he can get on the field in a different position, at least for this year, and then slide over to that Mike backer. We'll have to just see how that works out for Nick Bolton this season. But I think this was more of a pick for the future for after next year. I think that pretty much just says that the writing's on the wall for Anthony Hitchens after this season. Nick Bolton should be able to step in and play that position. And if both of these guys that we've taken 2 years in a row, Willie Gay and Nick Bolton, hit their ceilings, then you have a really good linebacking core for years to come. You got guys that can do a little bit of both things. You got a little bit of all of that. That was my thought process going through most of this. I'm excited about the player. That's something that I want to make sure I make clear. I'm very excited about the player in Nick Bolton. I think he's really good. I just thought that at the time, it was a tough pick with a lot of other options out there. But as we got through the draft, I started to like these first 2 picks a lot more, which leads me into the second pick, which is Creed Humphrey. Creed Humphrey was easily the best center in the draft. He shouldn't have still been on the board. I think that's something, and even with Nick Bolton as well, that's something that I do want to go ahead and throw back out there. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but both of these guys were drafted after where we thought they would go. So I think that also played a factor in the Chiefs taking them, is that they were falling at the time. A lot of people thought Nick Bolton could have been a first-round pick or even an early second-round pick. So for the Chiefs to get him at the end of the second round, that's good value. A lot of people thought Creed Humphrey would be late first round, early second round as well. For the Chiefs to get him late second round, that's great value there. That's also something that I think played a role in that. And after processing it for a couple of days, it was a lot easier to swallow that. Okay, they were taking guys that they thought were better than the position that they were drafted in at the time. It was the best player available type of thing. Creed Humphrey is in that same boat. I think Creed Humphrey's a really good player. I think Creed Humphrey probably starts from day one. So I see him getting some significant playing time in his rookie year. I think he's going to be a really good player. I thought after investing a lot on the interior offensive line in the offseason, you probably would have liked to see the Chiefs wait a little bit, because you still had other guys on the board that you think can play center. Landon Dickerson was still on the board. Quinn Miners, who's been trying to transition into being a center, who a lot of people liked from the Senior Bowl as well, was still on the board. So you did still have some folks on the board that you thought probably you could get a little later, but at the same time, that's a really good player, and it solidifies the center position as well. So that's something that I think is also another theme that Brett Veach is going after. We're in a win now window, and I think what he's doing is he's taking the approach of free agency part of the offseason seems like the win now mode for him. And then the draft a little bit more so seems solidifying the team for years to come, especially financially, because you think about a guy like Nick Bolton, you're going to get Anthony Hitchens off the books. You get Nick Bolton at a second round pick price for the next 4 years or so. You think about a guy, Creed Humphrey, you're not paying a whole lot of money to Austin Blythe, but at the same time, you're not going to have a center after next year. If Austin Blythe was the only center, you don't know who your center is going to be. You go right back into having another competition. So you end up in that situation where Creed Humphrey's now going to be that guy going forward, and Austin Blythe's going to be more of a depth piece. We'll see how he slides in. If a lot of you guys remember me talking about him, Austin Blythe had been a guard in the NFL for his career before last season when he was forced into playing center and did that really well. So it's not to say that Austin Blythe might just be a depth piece. He might not end up playing center for the Chiefs. We don't know where he ends up playing, but I think the theme of this is trying to solidify some of these positions for more than just next year. And I think that's what this draft looked like Brett Veach was trying to do. He was trying to solidify some of these positions, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later, but the right side of the offensive line is looking like a very healthy competition. I don't really know who I project to be the starters just yet, from center all the way to tackle. I'm almost certain with Creed Humphrey being a second round pick, I'm almost certain he ends up at least being the starter. Unless barring something crazy, I think Creed Humphrey's a really good player. He's played in a pass heavy offense under Lincoln Riley. He's played with some mobile quarterbacks. He's actually played with Orlando Brown in college, and they were familiar with one another. So that was another thing as well. And Orlando Brown was actually familiar with the two offensive linemen that the Chiefs drafted in this draft. He had a little conversation with Trey Smith as well on Twitter, who I'll get to a little bit later. But that's another thing too, is that he's friends with Orlando Brown. Both of them we anticipate being here at least the next few years. I think if Orlando Brown ends up playing well, which I expect him to do, the Chiefs are going to pay him. But now you got a cheap option at center. Your whole right side of the offensive line is going to be fairly cheap. So that left side is going to be the one making the money with Joe Thuney and then Orlando Brown over there as well. Creed Humphrey, another great player, another great prospect for the Chiefs to bring in. Another one that at the time of the pick, I wasn't wild about, just for some of the same reasons as Nick Bolton. But when you put it all in a vacuum and you look at the rest of this draft class, this pick starts to look a lot better retroactively. I'm excited to see both of those guys in the Chiefs uniform. And then I think that those two guys were kind of more like the safer bets. They were the good players that fell a little bit at positions that the Chiefs will need eventually. And I think Brett Veach just wanted to go ahead and hop on to that and get that process started of filling those shoes that we were going to have to fill anyway here soon. I'm excited about both of those guys being here in Kansas City. I think Creed Humphrey's going to be really good. He tested out really well. He's an athletic freak from the center position. I think he has some of the best testing measurables and things like that of all time for center. He never allowed a sack. He's a guy who's going to be really good. He's going to be really good. I think all of those things just add to that. But I think all of that just speaks to say that he's going to be a really good player, a player that we're going to enjoy watching for a long time in KC. I'm excited about the pick. I'm excited about the player. And then that kind of led to some of the other things that happened through the rest of this draft. And then you had the day one guys. Those are guys that are a little bit more safe picks, guys we know are really good players that are going to step in and at least contribute in some way early. And then you got day two, which that was more, the Chiefs didn't have any third round picks, of course. So then you go into day two for the Chiefs, day three for the draft. And that's when things got a little interesting. That's when I think the Chiefs really bolstered this draft class a lot. You had your bets that Brett Veach made, starting with the Chiefs' fourth round pick, Joshua Kaindoh. Very talented player, very big guy, prototypical defensive end. He's a guy who even Brett Veach described him as a prototypical Steve Spagnuolo defensive end prototype. So he's a guy who, if you can get him in here under the right coach and you can mold him to what you want him to be. He was at Florida State. He spent 5 years at Florida State. He was a top 5 high school recruit coming out of high school. He went to Florida State, who we've known has struggled with coaching. They've struggled with success on the field. One thing they haven't struggled a whole lot with is recruiting 5-star guys, but they've lost a lot of games. I think that speaks to the coach in there. They didn't really develop guys how you would like to see them develop. So I think Joshua Kaindoh's Brett Veach's lottery ticket from day 3 of the draft, because if this guy reaches his ceiling, you could be talking about in a few years a guy who's one of the best players at the position in the NFL. He has the talent to do it. He has the size to do it. He has the tools to do it. It's just about coaching him to get there. And so we won't always know exactly what happened at Florida State. He did have some injury issues as well, and different things like that plagued his time there. But I think the biggest thing might have just been coaching. So we'll see when he gets in here. We'll see how he progresses as a player in Kansas City. This isn't a guy we should expect to see playing in his first year, maybe not even in his second year. I saw a lot of comparisons to Tanoh Kpassagnon. I think from a project standpoint, Tanoh Kpassagnon was a project. The Chiefs brought him in as a player who we didn't really know what we were going to get out of him. But he was also, I believe, a second-round pick. He was a lot more a premium pick, and he hadn't played football for a lot of time by the time he got drafted. And he also was coming from an FCS school. He went to Villanova. This situation is a lot different. Joshua Kaindoh, I think, has a lot better chance of panning out. He's been a football player his entire life. He's a guy who has the pedigree. He was a top recruit. I think he just ended up in a situation where he probably should have gone somewhere else at the time, but Florida State. It's not hard for those guys to recruit these five-star players, but they've also haven't been having a whole lot of success either with a lot of five-star talent on the roster. So that speaks a lot more to coaching than I would say mostly anything else. So I think Joshua Kaindoh was a great pick. He's got length. He's very athletic. He graded out as one of the more athletic guys in the edge class this year. I think he's going to be a very good player. I think if we can mold him to where we want him to be. So I think that's Brett Veach's lottery ticket from this draft. And to get it in the 4th round at the talent that he brings to the table, I think that's very good value. A lot of people are grading this pick a little bit worse just because he's not going to come in and play right away. And I agree. You probably want to try to find an edge player still. I think that's going to come in and play right away. But the offseason isn't over with. The Chiefs have had Melvin Ingram in the building this offseason. They're going to have other guys that get cut during training camp that they're going to talk to. I don't think Brett Veach is done at the edge position, but I think this is one of those moves, as I talked about before. This is one of those moves where you're looking towards the future. I don't anticipate Frank Clark being on the roster after next season. You need a big guy, an athletic guy, explosive guy to take that place. And I think that if you ideally think Joshua Kaindoh is going to hit his ceiling, you think he's going to be that guy. And you honestly probably would anticipate him being more productive than Frank Clark has been since he's been here on a consistent basis. Nobody's going to take away the fact that Frank Clark is the Chiefs' all-time leader in postseason sacks and those different things. He's done a lot of good while he's been here, but the consistency hasn't quite been there. He's left a lot to be desired from a health standpoint, different things like that. Joshua Kaindoh could kind of cash in that lottery ticket that Brett Veach is playing right now in a couple of years and step into being a contributor for this team. But I think we'll see. I don't anticipate Joshua Kaindoh knocking Mike Danna out of reps, or any of those guys that are already on the roster. I'm drawing a blank on the rest of the ends, but you got Mike Danna, you got Turk Warden, who plays inside and outside, and then Taco Charlton, of course, is going to be a pass rush specialist. So I think that those guys probably still get the snaps for now. Now, if Joshua Kaindoh comes in and he proves that with coaching he can progress fast, I don't see a reason why he couldn't play. But I think out of all of the guys, honestly, that we drafted, he probably plays the least amount in his first year or two as they develop him and get him where they want him to be. But I think if you get him to his potential, I think he can be one of the best players at the position in the league. He has that kind of talent. He has that kind of build. I'm excited about the Joshua Kaindoh pick and to see how it turns out. I still think that's a good pick for day 3 for the Chiefs. I also think that pick, as opposed to some of the other picks that could have been made at different points, I think that pick speaks to Brett Veach probably having something else up his sleeve at the edge position. I don't think we go into the season with edge looking the way that it does right now. I think a move for somebody like a Melvin Ingram or another guy who maybe gets cut, maybe even Justin Houston makes his way back to Kansas City. He hasn't re-signed either, but something along those lines. I see Brett Veach making another move at the edge position, but I think Joshua Kaindoh is a good project piece. And he got him at a good place. 4th round pick, good place for it. It's not a home run pick just yet, but I do think that it could end up being one of those types of picks if he works out and gets to his potential. I for sure think that is a possibility. The next guy the Chiefs drafted is going to be tight end Noah Gray out of Duke. The Chiefs actually traded up to go get Noah Gray, so they obviously liked him. He was more of an H-back type of player if you've watched Duke play. they're not a pass heavy type of system. They've got like the H back. He lined up all over the place. He did catch a decent amount of passes. Not high volume guy, but he's almost like a Travis Kelce like. If you watch his film and you watch him play, he's got the fluidity and routes, breaking in and out of routes as Travis Kelce. The open field athleticism, he also has that as well. And I think the Senior Bowl really helped him boost his stock a little bit to show that he could catch passes. Now, he didn't drop a lot of passes in college, but he also just didn't get a lot of volume. So I think that both of those things play parts in that during his time there. So he only dropped 3 passes in his whole career. He's played all over the field. He's played in the slot. He's played in line. He's played in the backfield. So he's done a lot of different things for that team. I think he can be like one of those prototypical type of H-back players for Andy Reid, and I think he'll just give him another option. I think Noah Gray could be good. I think we could see him playing a little bit this year. I don't know about him as a special teamer. I did not look into that, so I don't know about him as a special teamer, but maybe he ends up making an impact on special teams and gets on the field. But I do think that he does play a decent role in the offense. I think that them trading up for him means Andy Reid will have some kind of plan for the kid. So I think he'll be a good player. I think one other thing, though, talking about him being a Travis Kelce light, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about that. He also was a high school quarterback. So he has the mental aspect of being a quarterback. I think they really just went out and drafted a guy who is very reminiscent of Travis Kelce. Now, of course, Travis Kelce, I think, was even better of a prospect coming out of college. He had some off the field stuff and some disciplinary issues that I think may have hurt his stock a little bit. But I do think that this guy's got the fluidity in the open field. He can move his hips and get in and out of routes. I can see this guy being really good. Now, of course, he's not going to fill the shoes of Kelce, but he could come in and maybe take that mantle whenever Kelce decides to call it quits. So we'll see how this all works out. A lot of offenses in the NFL have 2 productive tight ends or guys who you can at least count on to play. And it's still football. Travis Kelce's as durable as they come, and I don't want to wish anything upon him, but that's not to say it's impossible for him to get hurt. So we never know what we'll need out of a backup tight end, but I'm excited the Chiefs went out and got one. I wasn't super familiar with Noah Gray before this. I did remember hearing his name around the Senior Bowl stuff. He had one of those. He had an insane catch. I can't remember who the quarterback was that threw it, but in the game, he had like a crazy catch during the game, but he also got a chance to show off his hands during Senior Bowl. So I think that's one of those things that you get to see. Like these guys during the draft process that go to these types of schools and play certain type of ways, they get a chance to show some stuff that they may not have gotten to show before. And I think that Noah Gray was kind of one of those people, just playing all over the field, playing in kind of an H-back type of system. He didn't really get a chance to show that he was a super fluid athlete all the time. He didn't get a chance to show that he could catch high volume of passes, but I think that he has the potential to do that, and I think he'll prove that here in KC. I think we'll see him get to play a little bit in his first year. Maybe not as much as Humphrey. I think Humphrey, out of all these guys, plays the most in his first year. And then I think second on that list, if I had to make my prediction, is going to be the Chiefs' next pick in the draft, Cornell Powell, receiver out of Clemson, number 181 overall. I'll preface my analysis on this pick by saying that when the Chiefs first made the Nick Bolton and Creed Humphrey picks in the second round, I'll admit I was pretty upset that we didn't go receiver with all of the receivers that were left. But I also will say that when they drafted Cornell Powell, they redeemed themselves. I'm probably one of not a whole lot of people in Kansas City that's familiar with Cornell Powell. A little bit of insight into me and my background. My dad's from South Carolina. I grew up rooting for teams out of Carolina as well and being a little bit more familiar with them. I've had family that's gone to Clemson, cousins that have graduated from there and things like that. I've actually been on the campus for a graduation for my first cousin. Definitely have family ties to the school. I've always followed them even before they were really good. The first quarterback I remember watching there was a guy, I think his last name was like Korn or something like that with a K. And then I vividly really remember the Tosh Boyd days and kind of those days of building the program for Dabo. Definitely been a Clemson Tigers follower for a long time. Most people that know me closely, they know that I'm actually familiar with Cornell Powell already. So I will say that I wasn't super familiar with him before this past year. He had a breakout season this past year. He didn't get a whole lot of chance to play, but he did wait it out. He was there for 5 years. He got a chance to learn under some of the best coaching in the country, learn under some of the best wide receiver NFL prospects in the country. And then this year, he just put it all together and had a great year. So he was more of a late bloomer. He's not going to be a guy who's going to burn people, but he's more of a post-up guy. That's how Brett Veach explained it. He can get you touchdowns. He can get you short yardage. He's a really good route runner. I think going back and watching his highlights, I think I realized how much better of a route runner than I even gave him credit for before. A lot of you guys may know who he is from the college football playoff game. He absolutely demolished Shaun Wade, who was the Ohio State's top cornerback. He just went after him play after play. The guy just couldn't stay in front of him. And he was able to show his physicality. He was able to show how good of a route runner he is. I think that's an underrated part of his game. He's very physical. He can go get the ball even through contact. He did have some deep balls, was able to catch some deep balls, but the Chiefs won't need him for that because he doesn't really have the NFL level speed to be a deep ball threat. So I think that might have scared some teams off. If you watch him play, he looks a little bit faster in game than he is, I think, in test, but he tested pretty well, actually, for a receiver. He tested above average athletically in just about everything. And then I think for the role he's going to be asked to play in Kansas City, I think it'll be perfect. I can see him stepping in and playing some snaps first year. I don't know if he just fully supplants Demarcus Robinson or Mecole Hardman or anything like that. I think that remains to be seen. I think we have to see him preseason. We have to see him training camp and things like that to see if that's a possibility. But I do think that he's going to be a really good player. The Clemson staff was in love with him. He had some injuries, learning how to play. He played against some top pick receivers. He was playing with guys like Justin Ross, Amari Rodgers, who also got drafted in this draft. He was playing with guys like, why am I drawing blanks on these names? T. Higgins was on that team with them as well. You talk about a whole lot of NFL receivers on that roster. He was more of the odd man out. But you also think about him being on scout team and playing against one of the best defenses in the country every day and playing and being in the same wide receiver room with a whole slew of NFL wide receivers for coming from a program that's already been proven to put out really good receivers anyway. He's a guy who Dabo loved. He talked really highly of him. He talked about how hungry he is, how much better he wanted to get. And I think the loyalty thing is he could have easily left and went somewhere else. Receiver coming from Clemson, he would have been a guy who could have had any number of suitors. He could have gone anywhere he wanted to, but he waited it out. He understood, like, these are NFL level players. I'll never get the exposure that I'll be able to get here on the biggest stage. And he got to cash that in the college football playoff, which I think introduced him to a lot of people if you were able to watch that game against Ohio State. He had an awesome game that game. He left an impression on a lot of people. I'm excited to see what he can do for the Chiefs. I think for what he's proven to do well and what the Chiefs are needing, replacing that Sammy Watkins role, I think he fits that perfectly. He's a big guy. He's built like A.J. Brown. He's about 6 feet, over 200 pounds, really big guy, really athletic looking guy. So I think he's built well for that as well. I mean, he's going to do good things here in KC. I think it's just going to be about how much time he gets. I personally think he probably, after Creed Humphrey, who I think starts probably every game of the season, barring health, I think he'll probably get the second most playing time out of all of these guys that the Chiefs drafted this year. And then you'll see Nick Bolton get to play some too. I think it's going to depend on what the Chiefs want to do with him for his redshirt year. If he's going to have a redshirt year where he just learns the system, or if he's just going to be too good to where they have to put him out there and play some Will linebacker, some Sam linebacker, get him more familiar with the defense, get him more familiar with his teammates that he'll be calling plays for after this next upcoming season. I think Cornell Powell plays a decent amount in his rookie year as long as he shows up and shows he can do the things that he proved to do well at Clemson last year. He's going to take some coaching and things like that. And of course, you got to take some of that with a grain of salt. You got to see him come in the building first and prove it again. Definitely, my opinion of that could change as the offseason progresses. But I think just from first glance, from positional need and fit, I think he, outside of Creed Humphrey, probably has the best chance of playing a lot of snaps this year. So I'm excited to see how he moves up the ranks of the wide receiver room with the Chiefs and what he ends up doing for the Chiefs as well. And then lastly, but definitely not least, probably the Chiefs' most popular pick amongst national media is going to be offensive lineman Trey Smith. Offensive guard Trey Smith is what he's coming into the league as out of Tennessee. The Chiefs got him with the number 226 pick in the 6th round, and that is an absolute steal for this kid. He was a 4-year starter at Tennessee, one of the best players in the country, all SEC in 2019, a great kid as well, Man of the Year award winner, sportsmanship type award winner, second team All-American. This is a guy who really shouldn't have been there in the 6th round. I think in a non-COVID year, if he had a chance to prove his medicals a little bit more, get a chance to get in front of teams a little bit more, this is probably a guy who goes in the 3rd round. He had a second round grade, 3rd round grade, depending on where you look. No business being there in the 6th round. The Chiefs got an absolute steal for this guy. I think this is a guy who will start for the Chiefs offensive line over the next few years. I don't think that it's even a question. I think he's that good. If you go watch him, he is that good. All SEC player, played against some of the best players in the country on a weekly basis. And the biggest thing was just that he had some blood clotting issues in 2019. And that made him fall a little bit because they weren't able to get into the medicals as much as they wanted to. So he played a lot of different positions during his time in Tennessee. He played some guard, he played some tackle. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. This is a guy who there's just no reason the Chiefs should have got him in the 6th round. It's why this pick is talked about so much, because He was getting offers. He was getting offers before he even took snaps in high school, just off of his physical tools and his size. But everybody wanted him. He had offers from just about any and everybody you can think of. But he did go to Tennessee, stayed in state. He's just a really good football player. I still am trying to figure out how every team let him fall to the 6th round. I think the Chiefs got an absolute steal. This is going to be one of the most talked about picks for the Chiefs until the season starts. I don't know if he plays a whole lot this year, but after this year, you think about guys like Long, you think about guys like Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who probably is out after this year. You think about guys like Mike Remmers, who's probably out after this year. That right side of the line is going to need some help over there. And I think that as early as this next season, not the coming season, but the season after, we can see Trey Smith as a starter on the Chiefs offensive line. I don't think that's far-fetched by any stretch of the imagination. This dude can play football. If you go watch his film, he can play. But I think the blood clots are what scared a lot of teams away. I think in 2019, I believe there was a story that I read about Trey Smith that he was actually, the blood clots, for precautionary reasons, he was actually forced into practice one day a week or something like that. But that's something that he's tried to convince the teams that he's overcome in the time since then. And I think the Chiefs will get him in here. They'll be cautious with his medicals. They'll make sure everything checks out for him. But if everything checks out for this kid and he's able to be a full go to start, we don't know what will happen this offseason. He's a good enough player that he could come in and make an impression and play this year. But I just think with the money that's been invested, some guys are making a decent chunk of change over there on that right side. They probably give him a year to really push him, test his medicals, and get a good look at what they think he'll be for the Chiefs. But I think this is a guy who's going to start for the Chiefs for at least 3 or 4 years. You got him at a 6th round pick, which is just insane value for an All-American at any point of their career. Guys who are All-American as freshmen and never become All-American again, that still are able to rise up the draft boards higher than a 6th round pick. You think about a guy like Joshua Kando, who was a top 5 prospect coming out of high school, just like Trey Smith, playing in the ACC. The Chiefs drafted him in the 3rd round, or not the 3rd round, in the 4th round, sorry. So you just have you just have to scratch your head with this one on how he got to the Chiefs, but I'm definitely happy he did. But I think that he's just going to end up being a really good player for the Chiefs. It might take a little bit of time for them to really test out his medicals, test out what he can and can't do. But he obviously can play football, and he obviously can manage the blood clots because he was doing that even during the time in college. I don't think it's as big of a concern maybe as some people want to make it seem now. If that affects how much he can practice and he can get reps in, of course, coming into a new system, coming into a new team, that definitely affects that. But you get him in here, and if he doesn't have to worry about preparing every week for a game, you get him in here after a year and he learns the system, he learns the offense. He's a good enough player that in his 2nd year, he's going to be playing for the Chiefs. I'm excited to watch his development. I'm excited to see where he goes in the Chiefs organization, but I think the only way to go is up. You look at after this coming season, you're looking at having an offensive line of potentially Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and then you find yourself a right tackle that you want to play over there on the right side. That's a lot of pedigree. That's a lot of talent, a lot of investment by the Chiefs as well. But Brett Veach went out and he outdid himself with the offensive line thing. I'm excited to have Trey Smith on the Chiefs. That's probably my 2nd favorite pick. My favorite pick was Cornell Powell, and I think I'm probably have a little bit of second homer in me. I guess I'll start calling it second homer as far as him being from Clemson and getting a chance to watch him a little bit more so than maybe a lot of other folks did. But he always impressed me. He always seemed to jump off the screen from a hands perspective. He didn't drop a lot of passes. He could get behind the defense in college, but NFL speed is a little bit different. I don't know if you anticipate him doing that. I think he ran a 4.4, which is still faster than Demarcus Robinson, but that's neither here nor there. But either way, I think those two are in contention for my favorite picks in the draft. But I definitely say that getting those two in day 3 of the draft, day 2 for the Chiefs, getting those two really changed the whole perception that I had on the first day of the draft with everybody that the Chiefs drafted in day 2, honestly, or day 3 for the draft. I'm excited to watch them play. I'm excited to get all of these kids in here, see what they can do in the preseason. We get preseason football back this year. See what these kids can do in the preseason and get after it and continue to cover them and continue to watch what they're going to be doing. I guess my main thing for this is just saying that I think that Brett Veach is learning a lot. I think Brett Veach has gotten a lot better as a drafter. Some people probably were contentious like I was on those first couple picks, but he seems like he's improved tremendously since 2018 disaster of a draft class. I don't think we ever see that come from him again. I think he got a lot of value in this draft. I think he found a lot of good players late in this draft. He found a great player late in this draft with Trey Smith. You guys will not stop hearing about that over this offseason, whether it's from me, whether it's from people who cover other teams. You will hear his name a lot because there's no reason that guy should have been getting picked in the 6th round. But so the Chiefs got the steal of the draft. The Chiefs addressed every need that they had to address. I'm happy with the draft. I don't want to give it a grade because, of course, we got to see how these players play. Mac Jones gave his quote. He said, it's not about where you get picked. It's about what you do with the opportunity. That's exactly what this means for these guys. So where you got picked is only half the battle. And I will talk about some of these guys that I thought were reaches and things like that in episode 7, but it's not necessarily going to be grading them out because that grade is going to change. The grade could be different today than it was when the draft happened. It's going to be different halfway through training camp than it is at the beginning of training camp. It's going to be different halfway through the season for a lot of these players. That grade is going to change. So I don't want to give a grade until we're at least far enough down the road to know what we're going to get from these players. But I do want to say that I think this is a very successful draft. I think it could end up being very similar to last year's draft. Brett Veach had one player, the 7th round pick, Bo P. Keys, that he traded back in the draft. He's the only guy who didn't play significant time for the Chiefs out of last year's draft class. And I think outside of Joshua Kaindoh, I think Joshua Kaindoh is the only one that I really don't see a clear path to playing this year unless he just comes in and wows everybody. But there's a path to playing for every other player that got drafted this year in some way, shape, or form. There's a path to contributing to this team and also being a future building block as well. A lot of you guys remember me talking in episode 6.5 about how we need those pillars. We need those building block type of players. I know a lot of you guys remember that. And I think that you get guys like Trey Smith, you get a guy like Joshua Kaindoh reach his ceiling. Creed Humphrey's going to be a guy who's going to be on the offensive line for a long time. Nick Bolton, he's a guy who has insane potential to be a leader of the defense for years to come. These are guys that you could easily see becoming pillar type players for the defense or offense for the team in general, becoming cornerstone type players, especially those 2nd round picks. Value aside, those two are great players that is not hard to imagine being really good for the Chiefs for a long time. So I think that this was a positive turn in that regard for Brett Veach as far as finding those type of players. And I think he did a great job. I'm excited to see him get in here. I'm excited about this draft class. I did want to study all of these guys enough to get to say enough about each one of them. So I haven't had a chance to look at the undrafted free agent market. I do know that the Chiefs picked up a lot of defensive backs, which is something that I think the Chiefs needed anyway, just some depth at defensive back and linebacker as well. So they went out and got a hybrid kind of Dan Sorensen type of guy from BYU. Ironically, that's where Dan Sorensen went as well, but just different things like that. So I'll probably, in episode 7.5, I'll probably talk a little bit about the undrafted free agents and what they mean. Some of those guys are looking like at least decent special teams players. A lot of them were actually really good special teams players in college from what I've looked at so far. I just haven't gotten a chance to look at everybody yet. I'll get a chance to do that before episode 7.5, and I'll talk a little bit about those people as well. But for now, I just want to say I'm excited about this draft class. It got better as day 3 went on, just because, like I said before, day 2 or day 1 for the Chiefs, I wasn't wildly in love with it, but it definitely grew on me as the draft went on. So I'm excited to see how all of these guys play out, and I'm honestly ready to get training camp going so we can see which one of these guys are going to contribute. Because, like I said, I think Creed Humphrey starts from day 1. I think Nick Bolton gets a chance to play, but I think Cornell Powell probably plays a lot in year 1 as well. I don't know if he's the starter. I think that's going to remain to be seen with how he picks up the offense and different things like that. But I do think that Creed Humphrey plays a lot year 1. I think Cornell Powell plays a lot year 1. And I think all the rest of those guys at least have a shot. I think Noah Gray has a shot to see the field some. I think Trey Smith has a shot to start year 1. I don't think the Chiefs are ruling that out if he comes in and he's good enough and he's healthy enough. I don't think the Chiefs are ruling that out. I think we're just kind of in wait and see mode. We'll see how all of this stuff works out, but I'm excited about the class. Hope you guys are too. Hope you guys enjoy listening to me talk about it. Episode 7 will be coming soon. I got a couple of things to add to that as far as just things that have gone on in sports since I did episode 6 that I want to make sure I touch on in there. So be on the lookout for episode 7. Don't forget, go follow me, SA Sports _podcast on Instagram, the YouTube page, SA Sports or something about sports. I've got all that stuff out there. So don't hesitate to go follow me. Go listen on all the podcasts and platforms. Don't forget to give me a rating either. I forget to say that sometimes. Don't forget to rate me if you listen to me. Definitely give me a rating on those podcasts and platforms. And then also, if you have any inquiries or things you want to chat about, shoot me an email, sasports913@gmail.com. I want to get a few more episodes under my belt, but I have a couple of things that I think are lining up pretty fun to have coming down the pipeline. You guys keep sending me stuff, keep reaching out to me with some different things that you want to hear from me or people that want to maybe join me as a guest on the show. I'm definitely open to that as well. So don't hesitate to reach out with those inquiries or anything like that. I appreciate you guys for listening. Those of you that are still with me, continue to support, continue to engage on the social media pages. It's very appreciated. And like I said before, episode 7 will be coming really soon. So thanks one more time, and until next time.